Howdy, y'all. We're at middle adulthood, social emotional development, which is chapter 8. And this is the last of our one chapter a week periods. It'll pick up pace the next week. We'll have a full train stop at one stop, okay, for late childhood. All right, so in this we cover some really important content in this chapter. The main points being, first of all, parenting styles, which I'm going to talk a little bit about now, and then gender stereotypes and gender socialization, which is really important information, and I really suggest that you pay attention to the material in the book and the videos, especially video number 2 is really short, sort of touching video, I think, that makes a comment on gender socialization in our current culture. All right, so let me just briefly talk about parenting styles. When we look at parenting styles, what we look at, we identify 4 distinct different parenting styles. For each of these parenting styles, what we want to look at is a few things. In each of these domains, you could be high or low, okay? And the first one is this idea of a boundary setting or limits, okay? So does the parent set limits and control the child's behavior? You could be high or you could be low on this, okay? That's one. How much control do you have over the child? Okay. Another domain is communication. How much communication do you have with the child? How much do you explain things to the child? And you can be high or you can be low on this. And then the third domain is affection, okay? How much affection is shown towards the child? If you're high on this, you show a lot of affection, you're very tender and caring and show your love for the child. Low on it would mean you don't express that. Okay, so let's go through these, okay? Let's start with, the first one is what we call authoritarian. Now, if this helps you, great, and if it doesn't help you, forget it, okay? It helps me just devise these stupid little mnemonics, little tools to help me remember things, heuristics. They'd be called mnemonic heuristics. Okay, here's mine for this. If it helps you, great, and if it doesn't. For authoritarian, think about a real mean librarian. No offense to the librarians out there. But think about a really mean, cold, strict librarian. Authoritarian, librarian. The authoritarian parenting style is one that you have a high degree of control, all right, over the child, high degree of control, and low communication and low affection. So an authoritarian parent says, do this, and if the kid says, why? The parent says, because I told you to. I'm the parent, you're the child, okay? So with authoritarian, remember, strict, cold librarian, the authoritarian parent has a lot of control, low communication about why, reasons behind the rules, and third, not much affection shown towards the child, okay? Next, we get to what's called the permissive parenting style. Now, for this, what helps me remember this is think about P, permissive, equals party. This is the party parent, okay? This is the parent that likes to think that they're best friends with their kids, and that when we look at this permissive parenting style, there's no control, okay? The kids do what they want to. There's no limits on behavior. The kids do whatever the heck they want to. The positive aspect about permissive parenting is there is a lot of communication with the child, and there's a lot of affection shown towards the child, okay? This is the permissive parenting style. Now, you know, the problem with it, it's great that there's communication, and there's great that there's love shown. But, you know, the problem is kids need to have some boundaries set, right? Part of the job of a parent is to help the kids protect themselves and understand boundaries. So the authoritarian, the librarian one was bad because there was no love or communication, but there was boundaries. Permissive parent, there's not, okay? It's just party all the time, but there is affection shown there, okay? Now we come to the worst one, okay? The worst parenting style is called uninvolved. With the uninvolved parent, you have no limits. Kids can do whatever they want. There's no communication. Don't communicate with the kids at all. and there's no affection also. Okay, this is the worst outcome. Okay, sort of like feral children, right? No affection shown towards the children, no limit shown towards them, and no communication. That's really the worst of the three. And now we get finally to the sweet spot. Okay, the sweet spot is the authoritative parenting style, and I cannot for the life of me think of a mnemonic device to help me remember authoritative. Okay, but maybe if you remember authoritarian, librarian, permissive party, uninvolved, that the last one, authoritative. With authoritative, here's the idea: that you have limits and control on the child's behavior, high level of control. Kids need some boundaries, right? It's your job. You have to set boundaries and help the kids learn boundaries and that there's consequences for behavior. But with the authoritative, you also have a high level of communication and a high level of affection. Affection shown. So like, when I started off parenting, I was kind of the cop parent, okay, the librarian, authoritarian, librarian parent. There's rules, don't. So let me give you just my oldest daughter, Caitlin, really in some ways taught me how to be a good parent. Okay, so I like to hunt morel mushrooms in the spring. We go out to the woods looking for morel mushrooms, and I'm with my daughter out in the middle of the woods, and we come across an animal skeleton. Okay, and there's a skull there, and Caitlin says, "Daddy, I want to bring this skull home." All right, now what would you say as a parent? Right? What would you say? I said, hell no. You're not taking this dirty skeleton home. No. Okay, and we continued looking for mushrooms. We didn't find any mushrooms, so we got into the car. And Caitlin says, Dad, I'm feeling kind of angry at you right now. Okay, now here's communication. And I go, why are you angry at me? She says, well, I'm angry at you because you wouldn't let me take that skull home. I said, honey, it's probably got germs on it. It's icky. It's been sitting out in the woods. No, that's a bad idea. And she said, first of all, Dad, bugs had picked those bones completely clean. It was just the skull. All the bones were just there. There wasn't anything there. We had bags we were going to put the mushrooms in. We didn't find any mushrooms. We could have picked it up with a bag and even double bagged it, and it wouldn't have been icky. And right now, I think she was 4th grade at the time. In my science class, we're studying animal skeletons. And I wanted to take that skull to my class so my science class can figure out what kind of animal it is. So as I'm sitting there in the car and I think about it, and I think it's like, wow, those are really good points. Those are good reasons for picking up a skull. So here's the communication part, okay? So then I thought, you know what, Caitlin, those are really good reasons. And let's go back and get the skull, okay? And she was surprised. We went back and got the skull, put it, like she suggested, we double bagged it, picked up with one bag, put it in another bag. She took her to her class. They figured out, in some ways she was a little bit horrified when she found out what kind of animal it is, because she loves cats, and it turns out it was a house cat that had died in the woods. All right, so also I remember, like I said, really Caitlin's the one that taught me how to be a parent. One of the things she told me is, Dad, if you just tell me not to do something, don't do this, I won't do it, but if you tell me why, it helps me understand and why I shouldn't do it. And I thought, like, that's a good point. So, like, I tried to use that in my parenting style, explaining not just, here's a boundary, okay, but also explaining the why, the communication, and also showing affection, right? Showing affection and tenderness towards the child rather than being a cold, removed parent. Those are the sort of, that's the 4 parenting styles, and we want that sweet spot, okay? Now, we're not going to talk too much about here. That's also brought up is what's the best way to discipline children, okay? And this gets really controversial, and cultural issues, racial issues come into this, right? Because there's a difference in sometimes in racial, although sometimes it's more socioeconomic status than racial, but where we see, for example, with corporal punishment, okay? So it just so happens that we tend to see in African American families within that culture a higher acceptance of corporal punishment, spanking or whipping the kid, right, than in other cultures and other cultural groups. So like in white upper middle class cultural group, it's very frowned upon, okay? And so here's the way to approach this whole issue. I always struggle with how do we talk about this, because this is an example, right? Remember I talked you may recall from my earlier video, how it can be subtly racist, right? Human development, lifespan psychology can be subtly racist if they take one way of doing things, let's say parenting, and put it on a pedestal, and another way looks different. It's hard not that's a racist thing to say the white way to do it's the right way. And if you do it differently, you're inferior, right? But here's what I'll say is, okay, I personally don't believe in corporal punishment because I also have certain feelings. I consider myself a pacifist. I don't believe in the use of violence. I don't think violence is justified, and I think the use of violence is a lot of the problems in our society. So there's personal reasons why I don't believe in corporal punishment. Okay, we can, in class, we'll spend a lot of time arguing and discussing this. Here's the one thing I'll say looking at parenting styles. Here's where we can all agree. You need to have some control over your children, right? A part of a parent's job is to help that kid figure out that there's boundaries, and you need to set those boundaries, right? But I'll tell you, there's better ways to do it than corporal punishment. Now, with the day and age of cell phones, that's my baby, my Great Pyrenees baby. The way that I used to set boundaries was to take away, what was it, iPad or iPod. I started off taking away iPad, take away the cell phones as a consequence for the behavior if I needed to assert control over the child's behavior. And I'm telling you, that hurt them way more than a whooping. Way more. But anyway, it's the whole idea of whooping and corporal punishment is a really complicated process. We have to be careful about not imposing our worldview on the other person, right? But also, the bigger lesson from this is, with parenting styles, is this idea of how do you get some control over the child? We need to have limits on the child's behavior to protect them, right? We need to figure out a way to set limits. What's the most effective way? But also, when we set limits, the best outcome, there's really good PowerPoint. Check out the PowerPoints on this about the outcomes for children and what research suggests happens with authoritative or authoritarian parents, permissive parents, unevolved. I'm not going to tell you. It's really good on the PowerPoints or the book. The PowerPoints really summarizes it. The sweet spot. We want authoritative. As parents, we want control, but we want to be loving, and we want to communicate so that the kids learn. So it's not just don't do this, but why not to do this, okay? One brief thing, okay? And now I'll know who's watching the videos when it comes time for the midterm, right? Because now we're at minute 12. We'll find out who's still on board with this, okay? One thing I want to correct. I did a discussion board where I said, which theory do you think about how people learn language is the best? Okay, and I let you look at it and decide. Most people didn't get that right. Okay, research does come down on this consensus of the LAD, language acquisition device, seems to be what explains how kids learn language. That we're all born with this, like when you buy a computer and it comes with software loaded on already, okay? When we're born with software loaded in to our heads, language acquisition device. And what it does is it's there waiting to be exposed to whatever language the culture is. So if I'm here in America, maybe I learn English. If I'm in Saudi Arabia, I learn Arabic. If I'm in Brazil, I learn Portuguese, okay? And it's the software that's built in that really, the other explanations don't explain how easily and quickly we absorb language and learn the rules without having it being explained to us, right? That really does appear that, if I ask a question on the midterm, it's probably not going to be about the other approaches, interactionist or learning. It's going to be about this, what we call nativist approach, made famous by Noam Chomsky, that it appears that there's this language, the software we're preloaded with, language acquisition device, LAD, that's just in there. And it helps us quickly learn languages, learn rules to language. Let me give you one quick example. Sometimes in psychology, we look at where things go bad, when there's mistakes, that how we learn, like we learn with illusions, with visual illusions. Sometimes it helps us learn how eyes work. Okay, so when a little kid says, I braked my toy, okay, what does that tell you? The kid says, I braked my toy. All right. No one has sat down with that kid and said, let me explain something to you, kid. When you want to talk about something in the past, what you do is you add ed to the verb, and that shows it's in the past. No. The kid figured it out on his own that in the past we do breaked, you had ed. What the kid didn't know was that break is an irregular verb and the past participle of the term is broke. But that shows that the kid's already somehow figuring out these rules. They're figuring out the rules on their own. The software is there in the brain to figure out rules to language and help you learn the language. And really the LAD is the approach that best explains how we learn language. So if you've watched the video, you're going to know that now, that on the midterm, if I ask a question about language acquisition, really most people agree that's the nativist approach, that this language acquisition device we seem to be born with. And it's just waiting to be exposed to a specific language, and then it figures out the language. All right, good luck as we head towards the midterm. I have some tips for you in the next video. Be sure to watch the video, because I have some tips about how to do overviews for the midterms. Okay? See you later.